Hello. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start the second half of our unit. So we're going to be talking about European exploration for the next couple of lectures. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the causes of exploration and colonization. And then we're also going to talk about how Portugal and Spain, who are first big power players in terms of colonization and exploration, we're going to talk about how they competed with one another for power and control of the New World. All right, so in the 1500s, Europeans began to explore, big air quotes there, by explore we know they mean colonize, the rest of the world. But why did they do that? So fortunately for us, there's a really handy mnemonic that will help us remember the causes. And this is God, gold, and glory. So what do each one of those things mean? So the first reason here is God. So some of the folks who participated in exploration, especially Catholic missionaries, so people who were part of the Catholic Church, wanted to go out and convert the peoples of the New World to Catholicism. So what that would do is, first of all, they felt like they just had a moral duty to tell people what they believed was sort of something they needed to know. But they also, of course, wanted to add to the power of the Catholic Church. So that's reason one. But there were some kind of more base reasons at hand here, and those are gold and glory. So when we mean gold, we mean money. So a lot of monarchs and then a lot of individual explorers were motivated by the possibility of economic and financial gain. And in the next slide, we'll look a little bit more about what that means. But they were also motivated by glory. So we mentioned that Spain was one of the really big power players, and we know that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella are in charge of Spain right now. And we know that as new monarchs, one of their goal was to increase the powers of the monarchy and increase the powers of their country. So one way they could do that and gain power and prestige was to establish control over overseas trade routes and establish control over colonies. So I think of it as kind of like Pokemon cards. Like, you got to get a bunch if you want to be really cool, right? So in addition to those reasons, there are also just the fact that Europeans were kind of curious about the rest of the world, right? So previous explorers had kind of brought back these fantastic tales of what the rest of the world was like, and Europeans wanted to see that. All right, so as promised, let's talk a little bit more about what we mean when we say gold, right? And gold was probably, of God, gold, and glory, gold was probably the biggest factor. So there are definitely folks who are motivated by Catholicism. There are definitely folks who are motivated by just gaining power and prestige for their country. But sort of at the heart of pretty much everyone's travels was economic motives. So what was going on here is that you read a little bit about the rise of the Ottoman Empire. And if you look at the Ottoman Empire, which is based in modern-day Turkey, if you look at them on a map, you'll notice that they're in between Europe and the Middle East. So if Europeans wanted to go to the Middle East, which we know they like to do because they like to trade all those luxury goods like precious metals and spices, they now had to go through the Ottoman Empire. And this was really expensive because various Ottoman merchants and folks who lived there acted like middlemen, and they would charge Europeans money, right? So if you wanted to make higher profits, trading all these luxury goods, right? Europeans had to find a way around those Ottoman middlemen. So what they decided to do is, rather than go over land through the Ottoman Empire, they were going to try and go around the Ottoman Empire overseas. And just as a little FYI here, it used to be, not so much anymore, but a lot of folks used to think that during this time period, Europeans thought the earth was flat. That's not actually true. So in terms of overseas routes, what Europeans thought is they could go around Africa, which is really dangerous and takes a really long time. And then what Columbus thought, and we'll come back to him in a little bit, he thought you could actually go west because he knew the earth was round. So they could kind of like just sail west and go all the way around the world, and then you would end up in India and the Middle East. All right. So in addition to all those factors that motivated European exploration, there was also some technology that helped facilitate it. And one of those were advances in map making. And there was also some navigational technology like the compass and the astrolabe that made navigation more accurate. And just a little throwback to the first part of our unit, part of the reason why cartography, i.e. map making, got better was because Europeans, when they gained access to those Greek and Roman texts in the Middle East that had been kept safe there, they also got access to some geography texts that made their maps better because the Greeks were very good at geography. Now, in addition to all that navigational technology, the Portuguese also invented this ship called a caravel, which is really lightweight and easily maneuverable, so it could turn around really nice, and that made travel faster and easier. And the bottom line here is that all these technological advances, whether it was navigational technology or those ships, made travel not only easier, but less risky. So what that meant is that at first monarchs, and then as we'll find out, private corporations, were more willing to finance these expeditions to places they had never been, right? Your ship's less likely to sink, so you are more likely to invest money in that travel. All right, so there's some pictures. There's a caravel. And then there's an astrolabe, and just by the way, an astrolabe helps sailors with navigation because it allows them to determine the latitude of a ship, so you know you're not going too far north or too far south. All right, so Portugal's going to get the ball rolling in terms of exploration. And this begins with Prince Henry the Navigator. So what he does is he's very motivated by gold. Economic motives are very big for him. So, and literal gold too. He wants literal gold. So he finances expeditions to the west coast of Africa. And these prove very profitable as they are able to bring back not only gold, but also ivory and then slaves. So yeah, this is really when the European slave trade is going to pick up, and we'll talk more about that as well. Now, when these expeditions are successful, actually, King Henry the Navigator dies before I think they make it all the way around Africa. So it's future Portuguese leaders who take up the ball after Prince Henry. So they fund future expeditions that go all the way around Africa, and they go past Africa and to India and to the East Indies in search of spices. And just FYI, spices are really important during this time period because they don't have refrigeration. So spices are going to help you preserve your food. So you might be wondering, okay, so Portugal gets us started, but the whole world doesn't speak Portuguese today. So there's Portugal and then there's Brazil. Well, why does sort of most of the Americas, why do people speak Spanish or English? So who's going to pick up the baton here? And that, of course, oh, by the way, here's just a little map. So we see they start off in Portugal here. They manage to make it all the way around Africa. But you can imagine how dangerous this is, right? Africa's really big. That's a really long journey. All right. So yeah, Spain's going to sort of pick up from where Portugal left off, although not without some conflict, right? And we know how this happened, right? You've heard this story a million times. Christopher Columbus is going to approach King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and he's going to say, hey, you know what? I think I found a shortcut. We don't have to go around Africa. I'm just going to sail all the way west, and I'm going to make it to India that way. And Ferdinand and Isabella, just to go into a little bit, we know they're new monarchs, right? So they're very motivated by gaining power and money for their country. But remember, Ferdinand and Isabella have branded themselves the most Catholic monarchs, and they've used Catholicism to unify Spain. So they're motivated really by all three factors: God, gold, and glory. So they want to gain power for the Catholic Church, which enhances their power. They want to gain money. They want to gain prestige, all of that, right? So from here, right, we know the rest of the story. Columbus hits the Americas. He thinks he's hit the East Indies. He's wrong. He eventually figures that out, and he realized that he has discovered, quote unquote, a new world, right? It's new to him, not new to the people who live there, of course. All right, but this is not without some conflict. So Portugal, as we mentioned, right, they kind of drop off. They don't really have the resources or the interest in sustaining this big overseas empire, but they don't love what Spain is doing. So Columbus is actually going to contribute to some of this conflict. So what he decides to do, because he's a big jerk, he stops by Portugal on his way home back to Spain, and he gloats to the current Portuguese king, John II, about what he has discovered. And John is not at all happy about this because Spain is right next door. You don't want your neighbor to be more powerful than you are. So what he does is he approaches Ferdinand and Isabella, and he negotiates what's called the Treaty of Tordesillas. And what this treaty does is it divides the globe into Spanish and Portuguese spheres of influence. So it basically splits it in half, not half, as we'll see, splits it in between them. So Portugal gets to retain control over its eastern trade routes and gets a little tiny chunk of South America. That's today Brazil. That's why they speak Portuguese. And then Spain is going to get the Atlantic trade routes and most of the Americas. And there's an image, right? So Spain is going to get all of this area. We know what happens up here eventually. And then this is going to belong to Portugal and Brazil. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.